In 2017, in the quiet village of Kwansila near Port St. John's, South Africa, 70-year-old Nontoswelo Gwanya had just finished feeding her 4-year-old grandson, Kamvile Ngala. Like any other day, he ran outside to play with his friends, his laughter fading into the distance. But this time, he would never return. As the hours passed, worry turned into panic. A frantic search began, with neighbours joining in, calling his name and scouring the village. Then came the moment of horror. Nontoswelo made a discovery so gruesome, it defied belief. A family spokesperson would later describe the scene and quote, "It was like slaughtering sheep for a ritual. A liver sat in one dish and a severed hand in another. What people saw in that flat will haunt them forever." This is only a short case, but I found it so shocking and tragic that I wanted to share it with you. Kamva was just innocently playing with his friends, and then this happened. And even the perpetrator himself leaves me conflicted. Honestly, this is a brutal and horrific case all round. There are not many images, so please bear with me as it's only short. But before we dive in, if you find this video fascinating, then please drop it a like and leave me a comment below. And if you are new here, then please hit the subscribe button and consider following me on Instagram. It all really helps. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. I am not sure of the exact date, but it was sometime in early 2017 in the small village of Kwansila, South Africa. Kamvile Ngala, affectionately known as Kamva, had been living with his grandmother, Nontoswelo Gwanya, since he was just 3 months old. His mother, married but still in education and too young for the weight of the responsibility, had left him in his grandmother's care. For years, Nontoswelo raised him as her own. That afternoon, at around 2 p.m, Kamva had just finished his meal when he asked, as he did every day, if he could go outside and play with his friends. He never ventured far, and usually he was never gone for long. His grandmother later described him as, and quote, "a happy soul, high-spirited and wise beyond his years." But as the clock neared 3 p.m, unease crept in. Nontoswelo stepped outside to call him home, but Kamva was nowhere to be found. At first, she checked with relatives nearby, assuming he had wandered to their homes, but there was no sign of him. Anxiety quickly turned to dread as family members gathered, their concern deepening with every unanswered call of his name. By nightfall, Kamva's disappearance was reported to the local traditional leader. Soon, the entire village joined the frantic search, scouring the land far and wide, even beyond the town's borders. Kamva had vanished without a trace. Desperation turned to horror when Nontoswelo's sister urged her to check the home of a relative, 30-year-old Mandisi Gwana. She said, and quote, "He is in the grip of Satan. I never trusted him." Mandisi only returned to the village a month earlier. Before that, he had been serving a 7-year sentence in Boksburg prison for murder. Despite his past, the family had welcomed him back with open arms. Nontoswelo had treated him like a son. He had been working at a panel beating workshop, trying to rebuild his life, or so they believed. At 2 a.m, with fear gnawing at her, Nontoswelo arrived at Mandisi's house. She knocked on, no answer. She knocked again, harder, still silence. Her suspicions grew and she forced the door open. What she saw next would haunt her forever. She said, and quote, "I thought a pig had been slaughtered. There was so much blood. Then I saw the hand of my son and pieces of meat." Mandisi stood there. He didn't deny it. He confessed immediately that he had eaten his nephew's flesh. Nontuswello's screams pierced the area, and the villagers quickly gathered. She stumbled outside, unable to bear the sight, and waited in shock for the authorities to arrive. When the police did arrive, they broke the door down, and then they were met with a scene out of a nightmare. Kamver's remains were scattered across the floor, his body dismembered as if for ritual slaughter. The body was carefully skinned, and so was the skull, which had been removed from the body and split into 2 pieces, and was clean of any flesh with the eyes gouged out. The remains of his brains were by a salt shaker, and his liver was in a bowl, and some of his other organs were scattered on the floor. Calmly, Mandisi admitted to drinking Kamver's blood and eating his heart and brain. It was reported that Mandisi was taking substances and was clearly mentally unwell. He was arrested on the spot, but the damage was done. For those who entered that house, what they saw would haunt them forever. Mandisi Gwanya remained in custody for well over a year, largely due to difficulties in securing legal representation. No one wanted to defend him, and even when he was assigned legal aid, his representatives failed to appear in court. Meanwhile, outrage spread through the community. Hundreds of pupils from the Roman Catholic Junior Secondary School took to the streets, demanding that Mandisi be denied bail. Their protest quickly grew as local villagers, Port St. John's councillors, and students from Port St. John's High School joined the demonstration. A petition signed by nearly everyone in the area was delivered to the magistrates, urging them to show no leniency. The memorandum read, "Granting bail is a translation of the lawlessness of our country. The courts must convey a meaningful message by not granting bail to ruthless, notorious, cruel, and merciless killers." The pupils of the local school were terrified. They said, and quote, "We're afraid he will eat us all." When Mandisi finally appeared in court, well over a year after the crime, and this was only because he refused legal aid, his words were blunt. He said, and quote, "I plead guilty to all the charges against me. I do not want lawyers, and I do not want bail. I am guilty as charged. I have no confidence in lawyers, and there is absolutely no need for one in this matter." While this plea showed a willingness to accept accountability, it also raised a troubling question. Should he have ever been released in the first place? Many began to question whether South African prisons conduct adequate psychiatric evaluations before allowing prisoners back into society. The People's Health Movement weighed in, stating, "There isn't adequate equipment in our prisons to deal with this. Our facilities lack the turnaround process needed to rehabilitate convicts before they re-enter society. Prisons claim to conduct screenings, but I don't believe they do effective mental health assessments. If you're in prison, you usually have to request to see a psychologist or psychiatrist." Mandisi had only been out for a month before committing such an unthinkable crime. Could this tragedy have been prevented? In the end, a psychiatric examination found Mandisi unfit to stand trial. Even in court, he seemed disconnected from reality. At one point, he said, "I thought I had a mother, but now I am not so sure." Despite his wish to be sentenced and serve his time in prison, he was instead sent to a mental hospital, where he will remain indefinitely. Whichever way you look at this case, it's tragic, and I really wanted to share it with you. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.